space in my little office. I hope you're having a really good evening or day wherever you are. It's nighttime here in California. So, this video, I have thought a lot about how I want to make it, or, different ways that I could approach it. I think it's hard because I want to talk about really big things, but I also want it to be relaxing, because I'm going to be talking about being overwhelmed by things that are really big in the world. I decided that I didn't want to make, big video essay, and instead I want to keep it really casual and personal and hopefully relaxing. So I hope that you enjoy it. You can put it on in the background if you want, do something else, but I'm going to be talking about the world we live in, and how I've been thinking about that. Both specific things about the world, like it seems how technology and culture are changing really quickly, but also about the concept of the world we live in as an idea. Essentially what I'm saying is that I used to think I had a grasp of the world we live in, and now I'm not sure, and that's okay. Really, I've been thinking about the stories that I grew up with. I went to public school like a lot of people, and then I went to college, and there was this idea of find a career, buy a home, and things get better and better. In the world, there was bad guys and good guys. There are people who act morally, and there are people who don't. This type of idea. And I also learned, the periodic table and how to multiply, which is probably great. That sort of thing. A lot of those stories became much more complicated as I grew up, right? In the United States specifically, some of those stories they seem to be like a myth. And the other stuff is kind of why was I taught this? Or why do we even live this way? If you really go deep into, maybe you went to a really good school. I went to a school that was rated unacceptable. There was a ranking system in Texas, but the school I went to was rated unacceptable, that type of thing. Regardless though, I often think about how simple the world, used to be or was supposed to be, and then kind of how it is now. So in the macro view, kind of in the big view of things, we know social media isn't great, but it does take up more and more of our lives, or it's supposed to, and AI is kind of making me think what is going to happen to all of our creative and even knowledge-based industries. It just seems to be happening fast. Climate change is definitely here, and it's just wacky weather all the time everywhere. And the bubble has really burst for me politically. There was just a time I remember Obama running against Mitt Romney. It was the first time I could vote. And it felt so easy. There's red and blue. There's Republicans and Democrats. And it felt like it was really easy to understand. And now I am truly our options here in the United States politically. Just baffled. Those are big things. Okay, so I'm setting the stage for kind of where some of my anxiety comes from. Those are the big things, right? But within that, there's being an individual. And I feel like being an individual is a full-time job if you let it be a full-time job. And what I mean by that is that we seem to have to take all those big macro narratives and translate them down onto individual actions that are on our shoulders. Like, we seem like we have to play this endless video game, and in the video game you have to dodge and evade all the microplastics in our food. You as an individual lose points if you listen to this or that celebrity who may or may not be cancelled, and there's also a list of brands that you should boycott, based on global geopolitical or social conflicts that you should be keeping up with. And also you should unpack your childhood trauma for sure and open a high yield savings account, that type of thing. There's a lot of stuff to do, like build an off-grid cabin, or live in a van, this or that thing, right? So there's hundreds, if not thousands, of lawyers on TikTok and TikTok bankers and, teenage gurus who got rid of their smartphones and are on a flip phone. Like, they're all waiting for you as an individual to help you transform your life. And you can transform it, scale that thing up and down, flip it around, what have you, right? It's just, I feel like it's a feature of modernity that we just have to keep optimizing ourselves, or we just have to find our meaning. And I wonder if you zoomed out and looked at all of history, if any other set of generations has had to do this to the extent that we've had to do this. And to be clear, like, having these choices is a really good thing. We don't have a caste system. I hope we don't. So, you can choose to be a vegan that has a t-shirt company and, who's a minimalist and has a podcast. Like, that's a good thing. You can choose to wake up at 5 and, rise and grind, that type of thing. We tend to think of those options as liberty. But how do we not freak out? Like, how do we not freak out by having all of these choices? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. How can you effectively decide if you should learn, like, where to focus your efforts? Like, do you learn to grow your own food, or do you want to start a company or be a YouTuber or a filmmaker? Or do you want to learn how to code? Do you want to learn a trade? Even when you decide on, a particular career, maybe how to navigate that is full of choices as well. I think part of the complication is that we have to make these choices about ourselves in that macro context that I talked about earlier. So that's kind of a lot. Like, say you watch Ugly Betty as a kid and you're like, man, I want to work for a magazine. I want to, like, design the editorials. That person may not be real depending on the time that you're aspiring to do that. Like, you may have to have a portfolio and shop yourself around, and then you might have to start using social media and TikTok and AI tools to stay ahead of the other artists who you're competing against who also use AI tools. That, all that stuff gets really tricky. And so I feel like I have a sense that we're all, individuals with dreams, and we, live in countries where we have freedom and liberty to follow these dreams, but it's like trying to, build a house out of real gingerbread. Like, the fantasy sometimes does not add up. And, I feel overwhelmed sometimes by, like, thinking about how to find my way as an individual, and all that fun stuff. So, I'm making this video on one hand to, say that anxiety is very real, and actually, I want to talk about, like, how I navigate it, because I actually feel very positive about personhood, being a person in the 21st century. But also I wanted to share two books that kind of validated my sense of, like, chaos. Like, the world is really chaotic, but that's also okay, and that's, like, really normal. So let me get those. Okay, I actually have them here on my desk. One of them is like a paper book, and the other one is a Kindle, but it's New Dark Age, Technology in the End of the Future by James Bridle, and then there's 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Noah Harari. These are super good. I recommend them. They're both kind of about the unknowability of the world that we find ourselves in. Like, they explore new technology, machine learning, and AI, and essentially talk about how, like, it's made the ability to have understanding and clarity in the world even harder than before. So this one I recommend if you really want to get really into the tech, and see real examples of the way in which we've mythologized technology to be this thing that's going to save us because it's objective and clean and scientific. But of course, information is incredibly biased, and it is used by human beings for emotional ends. And then this book, 21 Lessons. Let's see, I'll hold it up. I recommend this one if you want more of a look at the way that those issues of acceleration in technology is connected to politics, and other issues of the day. So, yeah, I recommend this book. This is an easier read than New Dark Age. It went by faster. And I recommend both. They're kind of in conversation to each other. So, those two books really validated my sense of being bewildered by the world around me. Like, I'm a real history nerd, and something that I've found when I read about World War II is that even historians who have spent their entire careers writing about World War II, there's a theme across literature where a lot of them struggle to describe why and how World War II happened in the first place. And I think it's just because it's too big. It's just too big. Like, it may be truly impossible to see such a large-scale geopolitical concept and synthesize it into one very big narrative. Because if you read about the start of World War II, it's like a bunch of small things that kind of amalgamate into this potion that just explodes out of the bottle. it's hard to capture in one thing. And I think we're kind of, at least I'm picking up on a kind of similar bigness, like too big, where I kind of see things happening and my brain wants to make one big really scary story out of them. And so I want to finally share what I use to come down to planet Earth when my thoughts get too big, because again, I actually feel very positive about being a person in the 21st century. I was glad I was born during this time. And if you're a curious person, it's like good to look at these things like AI and speculate how the world might change and be critical of the systems that we see around us and such. But if you're like me and your identity is getting like warped and twisted, like just your identity as a person, like using social media or navigating your career, not knowing what to even do with your time anymore, having to make your own meaning, if that's all super overwhelming, I will just share what I used to help me, and that is maps. Very similar to how people use maps to navigate very large and complicated terrain. I use maps to bring me back into myself when I venture out into very large, complicated topics, or I'm thinking about myself conceptually and it's just too big for my brain. I use maps. So I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. There's two. There's one for my kind of mental life when I am getting in a loop about the state of the world or about myself in the world. And the second is more my identity, like who I am as a person and how I spend my time and where I'm putting my body in space. Those two things, the mental life and identity and stuff, they're not separate, right? Like, that's impossible. Your identity is very related to your mental life, but just for practicality's sake, I keep them separate. So I'm going to switch to a top-down shot so you can see my desk again, and I will show you, draw some for you, and talk about just these really simple tools that I have to make over and over and over again in order to stay grounded in who I am, how I'm spending my time, and how I am thinking about big things that are maybe too big to fully understand. Okay, let's do it. Okay, this kind of applies to my mental life when I'm navigating topics, but the first thing that I kind of do is acknowledge that I don't really know much at all about a given thing. Like, okay, if the world around me, I'm noticing like the shrinking middle class, stuff like that. Kind of step number one is thinking, oh wow, I actually, I don't know. Okay. I'm thinking that I'm overwhelmed. I'm not really quite sure what capitalism is, right? I don't really know what socialism is. Like, I just know that there's a narrative that the middle class is shrinking, and then I've got kind of like two avenues I can go in my mental life. So the first one from there is I can choose, I'm drawing a turtle, I can choose something that is kind of more in my wheelhouse, that I can focus on instead. And this is just like if you need a mental health break. Like, capitalism should be thought about, and socialism should be thought about, but so should turtles. And honestly, if that's a little more black and white, if that's a little easier to go toward, that's what I go toward. And in a funny way, you can kind of ground larger macro topics like the economy, you can kind of use more specific things as like a grounding metaphor to kind of creatively understand bigger topics. So I either go, okay, I'm overwhelmed by like the state of the world today. I'm gonna learn about turtles, right? Or I say, no, I really want to understand economics. So I go the direction where I break it up kind of into smaller, more manageable sections, and I learn. I just kind of start somewhere and try and build like a bigger picture for myself. And the second that gets like a little too much, I kind of go and learn about something else, something more digestible. This is like a really simple way, instead of just like, over here is like the world of reacting wildly to like, here's my cell phone, like social media, just talking at me. Instead of just reacting to that, I try and like, stop and admit that I don't really know what's going on. And then I try and organize my mental life. But that is a little easier for me. And then there's broader issues of identity. This is kind of like addressing the question of, who am I in this wild world? How do I spend my time? My girlfriend actually found a template on Pinterest. I'll put it here on the screen. And it's just a fun curatorial exercise to put your identity in the form of a star. So, for example, in the middle of my star is the universe. Here's the universe. That's kind of the biggest macro story that I'm grounded in, not America or an economic system or even my family. Like, the biggest story that I have is like the universe. And then on the points of the star, right, there's 5 big points. I put things like that are major features of my life and my identity. So up here I've got my A tier, which is what I call like my inner circle of my heart, like my family, friends, my girlfriend, major features of my identity. Then I've got coffee. Coffee is like the ritual that grounds me to society. It's getting coffee with friends. It's going out to get coffees, trying new cafes and new places. It's my morning ritual. Coffee is incredibly important to kind of keep me regulated. Then I've got, books as my mental life. Nature, incredibly important for my well-being. And then videos, which is like my creative endeavors. And then I've got different things that kind of represent that more specifically in the corners of the star. But I'm going to take just one of these. Like, you can keep going with the map, and I'm going to show you by just focusing on one aspect of my identity. That's my creative identity. So if I go too deep in the YouTube rabbit hole and I'm freaking out, should I start getting into crypto? Should I open a business? I'm feeling down on myself because I'm not waking up every day at 6 a.m. and having a turmeric blueberry smoothie and walking, 20,000 million steps. Whenever I start getting too big in someone else's story, I will use some type of list to return to myself. So let's make one together, and I'll show you what I'm talking about in real time. So this is my creative life. So this is my creativity. So now, I'm a creative person. Do I open an Etsy store? Do I try and have a gallery show? What do I do? Okay, so one of the biggest ways that I'm creative is I make ASMR videos. Now, a feature of that, what really attracts me to this idea is the feature of coziness. So I like coziness in a lot of things. It's like a value. So I make ASMR. I like cozy content. Another thing that I've been doing is working on essay videos. And why this is really important to me is because I kind of care about, in my creativity, mass appeal. That's just something about me. I kind of care about mass appeal and maybe universal values or universal issues, like stuff that people go through. Another way that I'm creative, a big way, is I like to make animation. Something super important about animation to me is humor. Humor is like really important to stay grounded. Okay, another way that I like to be creative is kind of working on my website. I've had so many websites. I just like websites. And why I like them is because I like interactability. Is that how you spell that? Like interaction. I like to interact with something that's dynamic. I like people to interact. And maybe the final, big way that I'm creative is by looking at the world around me, looking at my own life. In a way that I'm kind of like creative is like, I really like connections. Like I really like watching a movie and making connections about it, and reading a book and making connections. So you can see just by kind of curating around this star, if I think I'm really creative, should I try and be a famous gallery artist? Maybe. I don't know. Sometimes being a gallery artist is hard to have mass appeal. Humor I could do. Interaction maybe. Cozy? I don't know. I'm not so sure. Now, I'm a creative person. What if I made an animated film? Yeah, that would be good. It could have humor, it's animation, it could have mass appeal, I could make it cozy, I could write the script based on my connections. That kind of checks a lot of my boxes. Can I start a t-shirt company? Should I get into the merch business to make money? Maybe. Maybe it doesn't involve ASMR, it doesn't involve essay. It could be cozy aesthetic, could have mass appeal, doesn't really involve animation, could maybe involve humor. It doesn't check as many of like the boxes as I want. So just kind of curating down like one aspect, like I'm a creative person and this is kind of my outlets, and this is a bit of the values behind those outlets. This kind of keeps me grounded in my identity, and is something that I can revisit, all the time. Kind of used to help me navigate the world. These types of maps are really fun to make. I recommend it if you're wanting to do some exploration and, I don't know, check in with yourself maybe. They're kind of fun to do. But yeah. As a recap, this is the star that I use. This can help me figure out how I want to spend my time, and like what to focus on and what to honestly tune out. Like I don't need to be opening up an Etsy store. Like life is really short. I should focus on making ASMR videos, making YouTube videos. It involves like all of this. YouTube involves all of this. I should focus on YouTube, and I should maybe ignore opening an Etsy store. Like, which one's the right choice? I don't know. Yeah, I do know. Okay. And then the first one is like, I want to be a part of the universe, so I don't I don't want to react to things I see on social media. You know, just because all my friends are on Instagram screaming about something and saying that you should be a social democrat, like, I need to tune this out and, like, stop, acknowledge that I really do not, I'm bewildered by the world, and I need to channel that energy as I needed into things that I can handle, like my interest in animals or the universe, right? And then when I'm ready to go into these topics, break them down into kind of small bite-sized pieces that relate to, like, they relate to other things, like they relate to, you know, the universe. Here's the sun. They, like, relate to that. They relate to, like, I don't know, just being a person in the world. And build, like, a kind of healthy system of understanding that is not this, like, alarmist, emotional, mental place to be in. So, it's like hygiene. This is like mental hygiene. Yeah, those are the maps. Thank you for checking out those maps with me. The star one was really fun to make, but I was getting hard on myself the other day, like, why do I need to make stuff like this? Like, every few months it seems like why can't I just know exactly who I am and exactly what I need to be focusing on? But then I just realized that of course I need this. Like, I just do. And I think, like I said earlier, if you are somebody who likes to, like, peek in the window at, like, all these massive topics all the time, and you just need that to be stimulated because you're a curious person, yeah, sometimes you need to just go touch grass again. And this is kind of like my way of touching grass. So, if you are kind of like that and you want some books to read, I definitely recommend the 21 Lessons and then the New Dark Age. This book, I've been meaning to do a whole video just on the book and what's in it, because it's a ton. But the author, a good way if you don't want to mess with this, there's a lot of interviews with James Bridle, and they're a very articulate person, and they do a wonderful job of explaining their concepts in podcast form. So I recommend, just if you use Spotify, typing that in, typing in James Bridle and seeing what episodes come up. I do that sometimes. So okay, that's all for this video. I hope it was relaxing for you and at least interesting. I hope you're having a really great night and you're able to calm down, and if you ever get overwhelmed, just read about turtles because they're real too and they need attention. So thank you so much as always for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.